is defined by each individual. When I used to teach our fine arts visual course, I would ask that same question. And one of my favorite answers is, art is a pretty picture. Well, at one time, beauty may have been the ultimate goal of art as an expression of man's creativity, but over time, its role and function has changed in society. It is a moving force in society.
And we see thousands and thousands of images a day, and so we're competing as painters. I'm competing as a painter with an image-saturated culture that is excessive. So what my job is to do is to make images that slow people down, that are seductive and that are quiet, and that one can feel a sense of a pensive space with an object that is about time and labor and love.
For myself, it is a thing that I have to do. It's a constant in my life, and it has been since I was about 13 years old. I am visually oriented, and I have a facility for observing things and translating what I've seen or thought about into an object for other people to see, and then for them to make their own judgment or response to the work. Art is a form of communication, but the nice thing or the interesting thing about it is that what the artist may be saying and what the viewer may be perceiving could easily be two different things.
I'm very interested in a lot of different things as a person, and as a person I like to incorporate that into my art, in my painting practice. I think a lot about lowbrow culture and pop culture and music and literature and film. And those are the things that move me as a person, and so I think it's important for me to pull those things in and create a string. Because ultimately what I'm trying to do as an artist is get my audience to be a little bit more sensitive about the world around me and them. To maybe look at the world in a way that they haven't considered. So my influences are really oftentimes complex. I like feeling jarred and unnerved. And so I try to create images that do the same thing, because I like feeling unstable in a way that makes me question my convictions. So I like narratives in film that provoke me. I like books that provoke me. I like art.
My grandfather also was in World War II, so I was influenced by some of the things that he brought back from Japan. And in high school, we had a few things that we did. It was all science related, all honors related. So in my junior year, I had to take an art selective. So it was music, art, theater. So I chose art. And immediately after that, I was hooked. I kept a sketchbook, I kept drawing and kept thinking in a different way. And after that, I went concurrently. So the very next year, I took drawing. So I'm like 16, 17, and from drawing, he took us into the print lab. From the print lab, I just kept going.
I was pretty strongly influenced by the pop art movement of the 1960s, Andy Warhol's Brillo boxes, and other artists of that ilk, taking the ordinary and elevating it to a new status by reinterpreting it, even if that reinterpretation looks exactly like the original. In my case, I work with cigarette paper packages, the packages that rolling papers come in, and while those are usually intimate in scale, maybe 1 to 2 inches, I work on those on my computer, and I make my own digital prints of them 2 feet by, 24 by 30 inches, sometimes 2 feet by 3 feet. Changing the scale of an object alters people's perceptions of it. A lot of the time what I like to do is take small things and make them very large, or take large things and make them very small. I like working in miniature.
6 years ago I was in the studio and I felt that things were not moving forward. I felt that I was crippled. I sort of went back to the drawing board and re-looked at my philosophy as an artist and truly did stand firm behind the notion of myself as an appropriation artist, but I felt that the ownership was becoming a real sincere issue for me. So I started to chop and I started to cut, literally, and I would cut up my images and I would reassemble them to create new images. When I did that, I realized that practically it made a lot more sense to do that on Photoshop. And so I started to appropriate from digital images, which to me were much more ubiquitous. Digital images are much more the way I consume images on a daily basis. So the printed matter that I was using were old. Many of them were from the 70s and the 60s, and I felt that I didn't really have a connection with that time period. And so the digital images that I found on Google Image Search were images that I felt were much more conducive to the 21st century.
A broad definition of music is organized sound, you know. So we're hearing random sounds all day long in our lives. What makes music different is that it's organized in some way. Usually melodically, but it could also be rhythmically, you know, and that's really the definition of music. For me personally, and this goes to the styles of music that I don't particularly like music that doesn't have a melody.
But yet the meaning is profound and important and significant. And I always loved it, you know, the sounds, all the possibilities, the structure, the beauty of it, the different ways that different people and different cultures can present music.
With everything. There's a graphic designer who, her name is Paula Scher, and she's an artist and a graphic designer. And she designed the Citibank logo. And when she did that, she did it in a boardroom on a napkin in about 30 seconds. And when she handed it to the CEO, he said, "That's ridiculous. How could you have done that in 30 seconds?" And she said, "I didn't do it in 30 seconds. I did it in 30 seconds and 35 years. Of every movie I've seen, of every book that I've read, of every experience I've ever..." Yeah, I listen to a lot of what music snobs would consider to be pretty bad music. I do listen to a lot of hip-hop and R&B. I grew up in a really, really diverse area that was the city, for the most part. And so it was something I grew up with, but as an adult, I began to really become influenced in terms of the posture I wanted to present to the world. There's a certain attitude that the women of hip-hop and R&B project that is appealing to me. It's appealing to me because I've always been kind of awkward and kind of nerdy and kind of artsy. And, you know, as a creative individual, I think that the thing that we do in art school is nurture people's idiosyncrasies. And for me, that's my individual flair. It's something that appeals to me because the women of hip-hop and R&B, you know, they ultimately project a certain tone of strength, but also humor and a go-with-the-flow attitude that, for me, in my work is about excess, and hip-hop is about excess. It's about empty excess to the point where it's sort of ridiculous, and that's something that I kind of love, but it's also something that I hate about American culture. A lot of artists, oftentimes to people who are not in the creative profession, may sometimes project a personality that is sometimes hyperbolic, that is extremes. So they may come off as overly sensitive, but I think it's, without being cliche, I think it's a passion. I think it's, we spend a lot of time indulging and focusing on the inside, focusing on who we are, the way we think the world is, our perceptions of it. And so I think that most of the world looking in on that may just say and write us off as very, very sensitive people.
Death and decay has been something that I've been very interested in. In my work, I often call it morbid beauty. But images like this, which is called The Most Beautiful Suicide. I use photography in my work, so I'll take an image that I might say, okay, let's try this, and I'll let my daughter play around. She's been my model for a while with it, so one of my favorite things has come from the use of flour, trying to make her look like a statue. So we covered her with flour, and it's just on the front porch, and we're playing around and playing it with different things, just, you know, with kids especially, you just shoot as much as you can. Taking that image and then making a print. There is a journey that happens because you take it, you make a high contrast image, you take out some of the details. Then what I was working with was an intaglio process, so it changes it completely. It changes it from being a photographic image. It changes it into more drawing, there's more lines, there's more depth, and there's a lot more chance. So there's things that happen to it that make it come alive in a different way, and that's why I print. It's because of those things. An image which is both beautiful, alluring, as well as mysterious. So you have to figure it out. You have to understand that there's something else going on. It's not blatant. It's not right in front of your face. There's a lot going on behind the history of the image, behind this certain grimace, this certain teeth-clenching moment, especially the black and white, not the stuff that actually shows gore. So it's a black and white image, so it just has this fallen figure. There's something very beautiful in that moment that you're capturing, and that you can't necessarily tell what's going on to start with, but this beautiful image of a falling and floating form. And it may come from love of water, seeing someone and how they swim. It's not unlike seeing someone as they're laying in an awkward position after they've something has happened. So I think those things have always interested me.
About it is that it started not really with learning to read music and learning the rules and things like that, but really learning by ear, you know, starting with sound, and then sort of learning to make sense of it after the fact, but really starting with just the sound. And there have to be days when you simply, like a machine, it's like practicing scales. You practice composing. I think about that a lot when I think about Bach, because, you know, we look at his music and it's just so well made, compositional basis. And so it's great music to study when you're learning to compose. You can take a look at one of these pieces and say, well, what are his ideas? How did he get them on the page? How did he spread them out? How did he turn his first idea into the whole piece? And you can learn to sort of mimic that and imitate it in your own style. The way that the notes sustain and last a long time. There's much more to it than just the notes. And what I think is so amazing about this piece is, compositionally, everything comes from this idea.
I think that creativity is a compulsion. Creativity is a compulsion. It's something that has to happen. And I think most artists wake up in the morning having to make something. Whether they're listened to, whether they're looked at, whether their work is made public, they have to make it.